Moving along to our next panelist and presenter, Kevin Kester is an educational sociologist. He researches and teaches educational responses to conflict, peace, and development in local and global contexts, and directs the Education, Conflict, and Peace Lab in the Department of Education at Seoul National University. His most recent book is The United Nations in Higher Education, Peacebuilding, Social Justice, and Global Cooperation for the 21st Century. Kevin.
Thank you, Sean, for the invitation, and thank you everyone else for joining us. In the interest of diffracting time and place, I'm in Seoul and it's 9:34 p.m. So your future for many of you. I'm going to respond in the next about 10 to 15 minutes to Sean's question that he provided us when he invited us to be on this panel, which is what are some current trends in contemporary peace and peace education research. So my response here is intended as a personal reflection, just like Rena's, on my own engagement with the intersecting fields of peace studies and peace education over the past about 15 years. I'm going to speak to the importance of three different trends that I see in peace education today. So I will highlight education in emergencies and the cultural political economy of education framework. I will highlight decolonial thinking and then as well diffraction. So let me begin. In recent years, there's been a resurgence of interest in the study of direct war and its impact on education in both political science and education departments and in international aid agencies. The seminal work of the teams at New York University and the University of Sussex, for example, have led groundbreaking research into education in emergencies, sometimes also called education in conflict-affected context, to differentiate it from the sort of education in emergencies that we are all facing now with COVID-19 and the climate crises. These projects are often very well funded with the backing of international aid agencies. Let me focus on the Sussex work here. The team in Sussex utilizes a cultural political economy of education approach, or CPEE. This approach is rigorous, it's theoretically grounded, and empirically informed, although often it does not employ linear models of regression analyses or randomized controlled trials, which funders seem to prioritize. What I find important to the CPEE approach, and presumably so do the funders, is its emphasis on the wider cultural political economy that affects education, conflict, and peace. For me, this analysis is much needed in the light of more individualized approaches to peace education that tend to emphasize individual attitudes and behaviors rather than systemic analysis. For example, in recent months, I've reviewed dozens of papers for leading journals on the topic of peace education. And a recurring problem that I see is the lack of systemic and contextual analysis beyond the classroom. This is, for me, a serious limitation for the field, as peace education does not operate in a bubble. So this linkage of peace education with broader education in emergencies debates is one promising area that I've witnessed in the past several years. There are two other promising trends as well. The first one is the decolonial turn that Rena spoke about. The decolonial turn is driven by questions of epistemic violence, and it's this notion of epistemic violence that I want to add to the usual diagnoses of direct cultural and structural violence in peace and peace education research. Decolonial thinking includes questions of whose knowledge is and whose bodies are excluded or included in peace and peace education, and toward what effect. Decolonizing peace and peace education then entails the inclusion of the histories and experiences of colonized peoples, offering accounts of peace and peace education that force the field to confront its coloniality, such as lingering Eurocentrism in curriculum and pedagogy. This is an area of research that I've been engaging with my colleagues in Cambridge for the past 5 years. We have variously called this work post-structural violence to indicate the complicity of peace workers and the reproduction of systemic forms of erasure, or what de Sousa Santos calls epistemicide. So the second area that I find important in contemporary trends is decolonial efforts in peace and peace education. And let me, in the interest of trying to translate this into the way that we practice it, let me try to give a concrete example of how I integrate this in my teaching and in my research. So in my own courses, I've taken a few what I would call small practical measures to support decoloniality. And I encourage my colleagues to do the same. First, I've added a number of Korean journals to my undergraduate and postgraduate syllabi in Korea. These are invaluable resources for students, faculty, researchers, and others working at the intersections of Korean and English language-based scholarship and praxis. In my research, I then conduct multilingual literature reviews to support thinking across and beyond epistemic boundaries. A similar action could be taken in other contexts. And though this may seem obvious to many of you, it is surprising how few courses or research projects actually do this. Second, looking toward the global South, in order to transcend Eurocentricity in teaching, learning, and research, I've drawn on the groundbreaking work of Arturo Escobar, Raywin Connell, Juan-Xing Chen, Walter Mignolo, Boaventura de Sousa Santos, and many others to provide students Southern theories through which to analyze and digest the world of educational research and peace beyond the North and West. And I really think that's crucial to utilize those global South theories as a modality through which to think differently. And so education and emergencies for expanding peace education inquiry beyond peace education, and decolonial thinking for questioning Eurocentric norms of the field provide useful lenses for critical peace work today. Now let me turn to the third area of diffraction. Diffraction offers two key insights. First, diffraction argues that a single theory for peace cannot fully capture the radiance of its complexity. Instead, it contends that phenomena should be examined through a variety of theoretical lenses to reveal various dimensions of contemporary social and political life. Diffraction, then, like decolonial thinking, is arguing for plurality and diversity. Second, diffraction emphasizes the importance of ontology, not just epistemology. Put simply, diffraction means a diffusion of knowledge differently as it moves through the prism of different positions, that is, locations, different times, different theories, in ways that differ and thus change its meaning. Often this is expressed through the concept of the agency of things. That is, how technology or regimes of truth, for example, numbers such as the p-value of 95% or 3.5%, have taken on lives of their own to both constrain and enable agency beyond the human. So I've attempted to employ the concept of diffraction in my teaching and research as well. For me, in teaching, this means that I must teach concepts through multiple modalities, such as through a text, a book, or readings, through videos, through the self with myself and my students, through self-reflection, through others by engaging students with their peers as part of the curriculum, through lectures with students, so learning from the lecturer, and through social engagement with experiential learning in society. And what this means is that the students learn the same concept diffracted through different angles, with each iteration revealing a deeper layer of meaning and possibility. Examining phenomena such as peace and conflict through these various angles diffracts their essence. In my research, then, I employ multiple theories to understand the same issue. Here I draw on Elizabeth Adams St. Pierre, who herself is drawing on Karen Barad to diffract points of inquiry through the various lenses of Derrida, Foucault, or Deleuze and Guattari, to mention some of the names that she mentions. And of course, integrating this thinking with decolonial thinking, I expand further beyond the Eurocentric names just given. For me, this diffractive approach really brings to the forefront the role of ontology in affecting the way we think. And I take from this that our peace work must not only be about thinking differently, but be about being able to live and be differently. So in the end, what all of this points to for me is the importance of the social purpose of our work. In what ways do our methodologies, epistemologies, and ontologies contribute to wider efforts for justice, inclusion, and rights? Thank you, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you again, Sean.